My guest this week is the inspirational 𝗵𝗃 Hirschfield, Australian diver, oceanographer, award-winning underwater photographer and columnist for Divelog Australasia Magazine. 𝗵𝗃 Hirschfield is a qualified master diver with specialist training in underwater photography, wreck diving, nitrox and rescue. She also has certification in underwater navigation, but says that following her underwater would be a huge mistake. In 2010, 𝗵𝗃 was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, and in 2014 was told it was incurable. But she dives because it makes her feel truly alive, and there is nothing in the world like ocean therapy. But she truly believes that a day underwater is better than a year above. She has over 1,400 dives to her credit and numerous photography awards. 𝗵𝗃 is a real-life mermaid who truly lives to dive another day. G'day, 𝗵𝗃. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
It's so wonderful to meet you after, exchanging emails and exchanging messages on Facebook and things like that. And I'm stoked that you've taken the time to come and chat to us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think that's the world we live in, isn't it? We can make lots of really good friends online, and then it's just an added bonus when we actually get to have a face-to-face chat. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, awesome. Scuba diving, obviously, you've been diving for many years now, but you didn't take it up early. You sort of got into it. I think you got a gifted honey or anniversary package up the Great Barrier Reef, and then you went to Vanuatu and you took a dive there as well. Did you have any inspirations to be a scuba diver earlier on in life? Like, were you inspired by people like Valerie Taylor or 𝗪𝗃𝗃 Cousteau or anything like that?
I really had no concept of the ocean whatsoever. And yeah, my dad had given me a trip to go away up to Magnetic Island. And I thought, wow, that's on the Great Barrier Reef. The only thing I know that people do up there on the Great Barrier Reef is scuba dive. So I'd better book in for an introductory scuba dive, discover scuba. I just didn't have any concept that there was an ocean anywhere other than the Great Barrier Reef or on tropical islands. So I did my first scuba dive and was absolutely in love with it. And even though there were, I guess, something like 9 years between my first dive and my second dive, because I didn't know you could dive in Melbourne, who knew? Yeah, my dad from that very first introductory dive called me Scuba as a nickname because he just saw the affinity that I had with it. And the very first animal I ever met underwater was a giant clam, and I was obsessed with it from that point. But it took me a really long time to find my way to a tropical island. I went off to Vanuatu, and that's where, I figured, what do people do on tropical islands? They must scuba dive. So signed up for my course, and that's where I, actually got my open water certification. And it was a real revelation from there. So I've actually been diving for about 11 years now, and I've just done my 1,416th dive.
Wow. Did you rack up one today?
Not today, but I had 2 yesterday to make up for today.
Oh, wow. Because when I checked, I thought it was 1,413 or 1,414. It's like, I'm going to know the figure, but no, you had 2 more. Good on you. And and this is local. So you live in Victoria, somewhere near Port Phillip Bay?
Yeah, Mornington Peninsula, right on Port Phillip Bay. So I've probably got about 6 amazing piers that I can dive under within half an hour's drive from where I am. So on most given days, that's probably where anyone's going to find me.
And what's the visibility like? What was it like yesterday?
Oh, wow. Last night was a rough dive, actually. The conditions really kicked up, really strong surface winds, and it was a bit like a carnival beneath the surface.
Okay.
It's pretty rare that I'll get out with any air in my tank. I'll often be underwater for, between 2 and 4 hours in summer. But last night, I think 90 minutes was about the limit. And then, it's very hit and miss, but Victoria is probably the one place in Australia you can get good diving no matter what the conditions, if you pick the spot right, probably 90% of the time. It's not tide dependent. So whenever we get the hankering to dive, last night's dive, I got in at 10 p.m. Sometimes the group I dive with will get in at midnight. So you see different animals at different times of the day, different behaviors. So it's all good fun.
I remember my first night dive. I mean, apart from it being a little bit eerie that, you couldn't see beyond the torchlight or you couldn't see very much at all, really. It's a completely different world, isn't it? I mean, it's You can get different conditions during the daytime. You can get, really bright days, really great color, really good visibility. But at night, it's just another dimension again.
Yeah, night diving used to terrify me as a concept. And I guess that's the theme of my life. If something frightens me, I've got to face it and figure out what the deal is with it. And so I really decided I was going to have to start night diving. It was probably 100 dives in before I'd really done much night diving. And it's my favorite thing in the world now. I would take one night dive over 6 day dives anytime. Lots of cephalopods out and about, lots of really cool fish behaviors. So yeah, I think if anyone's ever thinking that it's terrifying, it probably is for about the first half a dive, and then you realize, as you said, it's absolutely magical.
Yeah, and you swim around a rock and there'll be a fish just sleeping up on the underside of a rock or something like that. It's, incredible. And any time underwater is a good time, isn't it, really?
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
As far as the scuba, obviously your local area is your favourite. I'm guessing you've got a number of different dive sites that you go to. But do you have any places that you just want to go back all the time and just go and say, I just need to go back there and have a dive again?
Yeah, I mean, locally there's 1 or 2 piers that I've dived like 500, 600 times.
Wow.
In terms of international stuff, Philippines for me is my absolute favourite. I've dived Fiji a couple of times. I love the shark action there. I wish I could see more sharks locally, but that's pretty rare when that happens.
Okay.
And, I've been able to dive the Solomon Islands multiple times, which are brilliant. That's the best of all the worlds, from the sharks to the reefs to the wrecks to beautiful marine life that you don't see in such abundance in other places. It's just so pristine. Yeah. But yeah, I've just about every country I've been to, I'd love to go back and dive again. I love local diving, but it is cold water. The warmest that we get is 20 degrees in Melbourne.
So what are you wearing?
Oh, in my local water, I'm 7 mil with a hood, with gloves, sometimes with double thermal socks. So I don't dive a dry suit. A lot of people dive dry suits where I am in Melbourne year round. I dive not to stay dry. And a lot of people I know with dry suits come out wetter than I am because of leaks and zips and seals and things playing up. So,
right.
And also as a photographer, I kind of have a 360-degree turning circle. Whereas if you're in a dry suit, you've got to worry about if my leg goes in this direction, there's going to be some kind of bubble I'm going to have to correct. I'd rather just be cold and have that flexibility to, dive upside down if I need to take a particular type of picture.
Now, we won't talk about the ways that people stay warm in wetsuits, but I know there's a couple of tricks. But it wasn't a great start to your scuba diving, though, was it? I read somewhere that you were actually physically ill the first 60 times you dived.
That's exactly right. I threw up the first 60 times I dived, and a lot of those dives were just in calm water beneath the pier. But it was just that, I'd had a history of motion sickness as a kid. I would get sick all the time in the car, just going from the house to the shop. As a passenger, when I first got my license, I had to pull over the side of the road because I was getting car sick just driving myself to work.
Wow.
So to take on something like scuba diving, where I'd never really had any connection with the water or the ocean before, people would say to me, why do you even still do this? You are so chronically ill. People would come up to me in the car park and go, were you the poor lady we could hear throwing up under the pier? Are you okay?
Oh, no.
And I would just always think, a bad minute underwater beats a good year on land. Yeah. And some people said to me, oh, listen, you'll grow out of it. And I'm like, oh man, I hope so. Every time I got on a boat, I would vow and declare I was never getting on another boat to dive, and did that for years, and then actually found some good 𝗙𝗃 tablets after trying everything else I could find to try, and these worked for me. And yeah, somehow now that's not an issue for me at all, thankfully.
But so you don't take medication anymore? It's just that got you over the hump?
Yeah, I'm not on a daily basis, I don't. But if I'm going out on what they call a liveaboard, which is it's kind of like a dive cruise where you might go out for anything between 2 days and 10 days. And I've been really lucky to go out, on some shark expeditions and, in the Maldives and from Papua New Guinea to Solomon Islands. And, it's a really good way. I love shore diving because I've can get in the water when I want, stay as long as I want, but to actually have that flexibility to do dive travel and to go out to some of the best places that you can't access easily without living on the boat. Yeah, I definitely take the medications.
Okay. Okay, cool. We're going to listen to your first song now, which is Invincible by 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃. So can you tell us a little bit why you picked this one?
Yeah, I think I actually kind of themed my songs, probably as a reflection of where I've been over the last few years in my own just personal life. But for those who followed Pink Tank Scuba, you're probably aware that I had a cancer diagnosis in 2010, then again in 2013, then again in 2014, at which point I did palliative radiotherapy. Now, at that point, when you get that kind of prognosis and they say, listen, by this stage, we can't fix you, but we can buy you some more time. So, you know, give up work, cross as much as you can off your bucket list. So I was out, I'd do palliative radiotherapy, and then I would go meet my first great white sharks. What else are you going to do? And then I'd come back and do my next lot of palliative radiotherapy, and then I'd go meet my first manta rays on Stradbroke Island, you know, and I just dived my way through it. And I thought, you know, and this is not to in any way diminish how other people deal with their prognosis or how they process difficult information, but I know, you know, there were people in my life who started to see me as dead girl walking at that point, and there was almost an expectation that, based on what I'd been told, that it was about time that I really curled up in a corner and waited for the end. And I was just like, that's not me, you know. That's one approach. And I got a lot of strength out of this 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗃 song. I am a bit of an 80s rock chick, to be honest. And I realized that, you know, you can be fierce. You can choose to be fierce when you're faced with the worst thing that, you know, your life can throw at you. And even when we feel weak, we can find ways to be fierce and to overcome and transcend it. So I guess that's why this song pretty much became my theme song. And anytime you know, yeah, there were times I'd lie down on the bed and cry my eyes out for 3 days. Of course there were.
Yeah.
But this song was what really, when I had it on repeat, was a bit like an intravenous strengthener for me emotionally, psychologically. And yeah, hopefully if someone's going through a tough time in their life and they can be a bit inspired by an 80s rock chick tune, then this one might help them as well.
I know about 4 or 5 years ago you did a raise awareness campaign to try and get the laws changed around stingray conservation, and you managed to. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and the journey that took?
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, I started diving a lot later in life than I would have liked, and I decided that I was just going to dive for myself. You know, I had my camera. I thought, you know, I'm never going to become a dive instructor. I didn't have any agenda other than when I went underwater, I saw these amazing animals. And, you know, you go to dinner parties, you sit down with someone and what do you do? And your passion just bubbles out. And I was telling them about this beautiful marine life, but I'm just like, no, I really want to show people. Yep. And so, you know, I'd studied photography at uni. I taught photography to high school students, and I thought, but I never had a passion for it until I went underwater. And for many years, I would just take photos of these beautiful animals, in particular, the big smooth rays and the little fiddler rays. But what I wouldn't take a photo of was how many of these animals I saw killed and thrown back as unwanted catch. Right. Even worse, some of them had suffered horrible mutilation. And for years, I would just dive and think, oh my goodness, this is just horrific. And that's a real indictment. And I really regret having to say that about myself. For years, I just thought that's terrible. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And then the penny dropped one day. I went, how many more years am I going to dive taking pretty pictures and just thinking to myself, that problem beneath the surface, somebody should do something about that. Yep. I wish that wasn't like that. And the penny dropped that if I don't do something about it, nothing's going to change, you know? So as you said, I'm the world's most reluctant activist. I don't like that word, but I felt that I had to become an advocate for that issue And I thought, if I'm seeing that and it's problematic, then other people are seeing it, and we all need to find each other and find a way to give this issue a voice.
Yeah.
And so we did join together. We basically, a number of people who had seen this issue banded together, and we got some really horrible images. So I went from taking beautiful images of marine life to celebrate and share, to these horrible images to raise awareness, RAYS, awareness. And that's what the campaign was called. And we had great opportunities, you know, through the media to connect with Victorian fisheries who were really responsive to the issue, who realised that what was happening with these rays was actually contravening some pre-existing regulation that needed to be both further enforced, but perhaps also modified, so that people could no longer catch the rays within a certain distance of the piers. And there were different levels of regulation that were brought in that hadn't existed before. And, you know, there's no one person who can take the credit for that change. That became a huge community issue. And sometimes all it means is that if we see a problem, we might not be the solution, but we can become a catalyst or a facilitator for further discussion and problem solving on the issue.
Yep.
And, you know, that was a really great outcome. And we started to see that problems that we'd observed every single day, every single dive, were becoming very infrequent as a result of the excellent work that fisheries had done in response to broad spread community concerns.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic. And more recently, SOS, Save Our Spider Crabs. How's that campaign going?
Yeah. So in 2015, I founded a group on Facebook called Spider Crabs Melbourne, which was basically a fan club for the Australian great spider crabs. The other name is giant spider crabs, but then everyone thinks about the big Japanese ones, the size of a person. That's not what they are. They're about hand size, a little bit bigger when they molt. And, you know, you've probably seen them on Blue Planet 2 and a lot of other kind of documentaries. People are really fascinated that they come in to the shallows en masse to molt their shells when they're most vulnerable for safety in numbers. And only 2 years ago, those crabs started to be targeted and pulled out of the water en masse at the most vulnerable stage of their life as a fairly low-grade fishing stock. Right. And so people who year after year, as part of a long-standing cultural tradition of celebration amongst people in the water and the local community, started to get really agitated that this was happening to this natural phenomenon. And so a separate group was formed. I was in the Philippines and quite sick when that first happened. So I wasn't involved. I didn't witness the first year of the crabs being targeted, but a separate group was formed that was championing that. And then the second year when it recurred, the Spider Crabs Melbourne group came together with the original proactive group, and we did that under the umbrella of SOS Save Our Spider Crabs. Yep. And we really advocated that those crabs shouldn't be targeted at all. Now, there was a bag limit of 30 per person per day of these really small crabs that pre-existed, and we were seeing a lot more than 30 being taken per person. People were taking 30, putting them in the car, going back, getting another 30. Now, that tells you how much meat isn't on them if you need 60, 90, 120 crabs to make yourself happy. Yeah. And they were harvesting them very quickly. So long story short, the Victorian Fisheries Authority has just introduced a halving of that bag limit. Now that they're seeing that still as being something they want to protect the emerging fishing interest in. So, you know, it's a tricky issue to navigate. And so that's certainly a step in a better direction. But, you know, we would still suggest that when you've got a natural phenomenon meeting for safety in numbers for only a couple of weeks and being highly vulnerable, then that should be a no-take time. Yeah. And, you know, if there are millions of crabs in the bay, catch those at another time when they're not trying to molt.
Exactly.
which can affect the breeding cycle. So it's still an ongoing issue, but yet again, there's been, some acknowledgement of the issue and some effort to work together with the community towards better outcomes, which is encouraging.
Yeah. Going back to when you first started diving, I know you sort of said that you took it on fairly late in life. So you 2010, you got quite ill, which knocked you out of diving for an extended period of time. I was just doing the maths. You've done 1,416 dives in probably 8 or 9 years maximum. So how often do you dive? I mean, I know you said you did 2 yesterday, but is it every day?
It's not every day. As often as energy and conditions will allow. So that can vary from day to day, week to week, month to month.
Yeah.
But, when you go on those liveaboard trips, which I was doing before I got ill or in between times when I was ill, you can easily do 5 dives a day for 10 days straight. And I have done that before,
right.
and that's thoroughly exhausting. And then you come home the next 2 months, you're face down on the floor because you're trying to find your energy again. So,
yeah.
But, on a typical sort of day, it's nicer to be underwater than not. And it's actually been a really important part of my health recovery. Early on, the oncologists would see me and they kind of like, oh, you're back again. We're surprised. And they're saying, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. They're all fully aware that I was diving.
Yeah.
And, they really supported and endorsed that. But I would say that, for so many reasons, diving is meditative, it's restorative. There's lots of talk about, the impact of cold water on cellular regeneration, just psychologically. And one of the songs, a bit later talks about, that I chose, talks about going underwater and being able to escape everything on land. When I'm down there, I can barely have a thought about all of the dramas going on above the surface.
Yeah.
And so there are just so many reasons for me that diving has played such a significant impact, whether it's on a cellular, physical level or every other level that I could imagine. I credit the diving for why I'm still functional and thriving today.
Yeah. Well, as you said, if it's doing you good, keep going. Some of the places that you dive obviously are going to be spectacular and some places are going to be pretty bad. Have you come across places that have just really like broken your heart about the conditions that you've encountered?
I don't want to say it, but probably the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah, right.
And, a lot of the tours that they do for diving probably cover the same spots. So you're seeing them and they're highly... they've got high traffic that go through them, which can have an impact.
Yeah.
So the Great Barrier Reef is a lot bigger than where people go on dive tours. And I have seen some spots as well on the reef that are absolutely brilliant. But the limited spots that I've accessed, there've been times where it's just been really bleached and really sad. The same can happen in Bali. You get in the water on the wrong day and there's more plastic in the water with you than there are fish.
Yeah. Wow.
So a lot of the issues that you see are, potentially man-made and need some intervention.
Yeah.
And a bit more awareness of our relationship to the ocean, even if we never enter it, because everything we do has an impact. We impact the ocean, we impact our life on land as well.
Yeah. And I know there's lots of campaigns for like single-use plastics and banning straws and all sorts of things like that. But the reality is people really don't become aware of these things until they're physically confronted. I was chatting to someone a couple of months ago now that sort of said, well, I went on holiday to Bali or to wherever they went and were walking along the beach and it was just terrible, the amount of rubbish that was washed up on the beach. And that was forced a culture shift. Do you think it takes that, or are people more, I suppose, globally aware, even though they haven't firsthand seen it? Do you think there's more happening on social media and mainstream media, things like what is it, Plastic Oceans, the documentary that was on Netflix. Last couple of years it's been on there, but is there more of that getting out there that's making a difference?
Yeah, I think definitely social media is and documentary makers are helping to shed light on that. And anyone who hasn't seen Plastic Ocean, the documentary, really needs to. It's not just for ocean lovers. If you've ever used plastic or intend to ever use it again, you should be watching that. You know, a lot of those countries that I've been to that you see all that rubbish, they don't have the garbage disposal infrastructure that we have. They, you know, the rubbish will stay on the side of the road. There's no truck coming to pick it up and take it away. Now, the problem is that in our Western world, we think we throw it away. We put it in a bin, someone takes it away, it no longer exists. It's no longer a problem. And that's quite delusional as well. So we don't have any sense of responsibility or culpability when it comes to how much plastic am I responsible for churning into that. You know, I've put a no junk mail sign on my mailbox because I don't want to be responsible for that much paper production even.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, how can I just be more aware about my own choices? But my own individual choices are only one tiny component of a massive societal flaw that is so self-destructive. So I think, you know, we really need to become aware as a society, and particularly in terms of big business, you know, and how we interact with big business, and how big business is legislated and regulated and channeled into solutions.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I know that's a great discussion to have, but I'm going to go your second song now. The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. Why did you pick this one?
Well, number one, there had to be Fleetwood Mac on my list of 5 songs. That was a non-negotiable.
Okay.
Number 2, The Chain is potentially the greatest song ever written by anyone ever. Number 3, totally biased. Number 3, again, it's a real testament to me about the good that can come out of intense adversity. You know, if you ever look into the background of Fleetwood Mac, that was the band where they were all constantly producing music out of their really dramatic, horrible relational interactions with each other on a personal level, but then they were channeling that into their artistry. And I guess, as I said before, all of my songs are reflecting where I'm at this point in my life, where I always believe that out of tremendous suffering and hardship, we can learn, and challenge, we can learn some of our deepest, most transformative lessons, and we can channel that into something really powerful and positive in the way that we process it and articulate it and have the honesty and integrity to share it. So I guess that's why I picked it. Plus, it's just an amazing song, and I hope everybody who's listening loves it.
Okay, Pete, I want to talk now a little bit about your underwater photography, because it's such an amazing part of the stories that you bring us from your scuba experiences. I know you've won a few competitions in the past, like the AIDE underwater photography. A couple of times you've won different divisions in ocean art. You've also had some of your images used in documentaries, and some of your video material used in documentaries like The Magical Land of Oz. What equipment do you use under there? How do you manage to capture such amazing images?
Yeah, so I love using a little compact camera.
Okay.
And I've got a big DSLR in a big expensive housing, and once you put a kit like that together, it's the equivalent of a nice car. But I always prefer for travel, and just so that I've got the flexibility of getting into small spaces and getting images and footage that people can't get with a big rig. I love shooting with an old, obsolete Canon G12 compact camera in a little $1,200 housing with a single strobe and a focus light, and just really small and simple.
Yep.
And I've had more success with those images than I have with my big camera. I think I've got about 6 magazine covers out of my little compact camera. Wow. So sometimes not necessarily what you've got, but how comfortable you are with that equipment, how well you know it. I dive with a lot of underwater photographers, many of whom are award-winning and some of whom are shooting on little Olympus TG cameras that don't even have fully manual functions, but they can do things that some of your big cameras can't do. Obviously, you're not going to get a billboard shot out of a compact camera. But in terms of competition, sometimes you're competing against DSLRs and people aren't sure, just looking at the image, what it was shot on.
And isn't that the way that photography goes these days anyway? It's like people are moving away from the big bulky professional equipment and getting awesome images using things like GoPros or, drones, for instance. I think or at least twice in the last 5 years, the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition has been won by, the first time was a GoPro picture of an orangutan climbing a tree. And the year before last, I think it was a drone shot of sharks feeding on a whale carcass. So it's really experimental, and whatever works, but it's really pushing those boundaries.
Yeah, I think obviously digital photography has made underwater photography so much more accessible. I mean, it's still expensive, but we're not limited to, like land photography. We're no longer limited on our expedition to, well, we can take 12 or 36 shots or whatever and make sure they're good. I can take 30 shots of something and hopefully there's one or two really good keepers in there. 2 days ago, for the first time out of 1,400 plus dives, I finally was able to photograph the transfer from a female seahorse to a male seahorse's pouch of the babies.
Oh, wow.
I've been waiting a very long time to get that shot. So, providing you're in the water a lot and you've got opportunity, it doesn't matter if you've got basic equipment or big equipment, you're going to have a chance at a good shot. And the more often you're in the water, the more that equipment becomes an extension of who you are. And yeah, like you said, it doesn't seem to matter anymore. Technology has got to the point where the smaller format cameras are on par, if not, better than some of the older large format cameras.
And I think also people have taken, well, obviously there's still always pictures to take, but we have a lot of pictures of, the different species as billboard shots or as shots that can be used in a field guide or in a book that shows what the species looks like and gives its key features. But when you can get a shot looking up with the sun up behind it underwater, or get into a crevice, as you say, with a small camera and get some hidden style of behavior that we don't normally get to see, it's that extra wow factor again.
Yeah, and I actually think that one of the greatest advantages of the compact camera over the DSLR is that with the DSLR underwater, you have to choose what you're going to shoot before you get in the water. Am I going to have a wide angle lens or am I going to have a macro lens? And that becomes a limiting factor for your entire dive. So if you've got a macro lens on, like I did once when the whale shark's coming towards you, you don't have an option to change. Whereas with the compact camera, there's a versatility there that, means that you're going to be able to get a shot that your mate next to you with the big, Rolls Royce camera is not going to be able to get because of the lens they put on.
Yeah. And you said before that you taught photography at high school level and you did at university as yourself, but what sort of photography were you doing back then? Like what was your passion as far as photography?
I did not have a passion as far as photography. I studied it at uni. I was doing a teaching degree. So I was an English teacher, literature teacher, and media studies teacher for a long time. And honestly, photography did not make sense to me until I went underwater.
Wow.
And then suddenly, I had literally got to the point where, photography was theoretical for me and pretty devoid of soul. And as soon as I went underwater, I went, oh, I've got to pick up a camera again. Now I know why I want to take pictures. So yeah, prior to that, it was
your job.
It was a job, yeah.
And the things you you're most passionate about trying to photograph? Is it behaviour or is it specific types of marine animals?
I'm passionate about marine life portraits.
Okay.
I like to just take either the soul of the animal and try and convey that as a sense of connection between the animal and the camera. So I tend to do a lot of work with marine life that's got a lot of eye contact. I try and work with the animal until it's fairly confident, comfortable, relaxed with me, and is happy just to be a little bit curious about what the camera is. And I also love taking pictures of divers with marine life. But if I get good behaviors, that's a total bonus. But when I get in the water on any given day, I'm trying to get a really nice marine life portrait.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we might listen to your third song now. My wife loves Billie Eilish, so I'm glad you picked one of those. Everything I Wanted. Why did you select this one?
Yeah, same theme as before, in that sometimes we go through some of the most difficult times of our lives and we've got two choices. We can step off the Golden Gate Bridge, which she mentions as a lyric and a possibility for her mindset when she was writing this song. Part of the story I love about this, the way this song was written, is that when Billie had written this song, her brother, who's her producer, Phineas O'Connell, he was really disturbed by it because it was so bleak. She'd written it and left it in this really dark place. And then he came in and he kind of just sort of guided the lyrics to, you know, their relationship and how he would be able to support her through that dark time in her life, and that she was able to have a real turnaround because of the solace from that relationship. I've got a very similar relationship with my brother throughout our entire lives, you know, either together or individually. The two of us have been through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And just to have that one person who, you know, when you're in your darkest moment, that will be there for you, that really resonated with me strongly in this. And, you know, I think Billie Eilish is such a strong, powerful voice to this new generation of music lovers. And she speaks timelessly to older generations of music lovers. And I just think the message, some of her music can be a little bit dark and a little bit satirical, but the message in this song in particular just really resonated with me, that it doesn't matter how deep and dark our mental state is, sometimes there's always a way through that, and sometimes that's the connection that we can provide to other people as well who are going through that kind of challenge in their life. So yeah, I really love this one.
Okay, PT, so you also write for Divelog Australasia, which you've done for about 5 or 6 years now. Your first column was "Don't Make Me Puke," and you chatted about the fact that you physically vomited for your first 60 dives. How often does that column come out, and where do you get your inspiration for what you write about?
Yeah, so that comes out, well, it used to come out every month, but the magazine has just gone to online only and every 2 months. So that's just happened recently. But it's very much a personal column. So there's a combination of, if I'm traveling, then I'll focus on wherever I'm traveling to. But clearly I haven't done much traveling since COVID world kicked in. There was also a lot about my, you know, local adventures or milestones. Initially, in the early days of my health journey and other personal challenges, I was kind of integrating my personal story with how diving was helping me to, you know, navigate whatever life was throwing at me. Also, I would focus on certain issues. So if there were debates within the country about shark nets and those sorts of things, you know, I would look at those types of issues. So it could sometimes be topical, or, you know, if they're just people who interest me that I'd like to explore and highlight and showcase what they're doing, then I would make that the focus. So
Awesome.
yeah, just whatever's happening in my dive life usually turns up in the column.
Great. And can people read that online? Is it just part of that magazine that they have to physically get?
Yeah, no, so they can read it online for free on any digital device. And if you just Google Divelog Australasia, you'll find it really easily.
Cool. And of course, you post on your social media profiles when those things come out as well. So if they follow, what's your is it Pink Tank Scuba? Is that the?
Yeah, Pink Tank Scuba on Facebook, Instagram, pinktankscuba.com, and YouTube.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, we'll put links to those in the summary for the talk as well, so people can follow you on those. Now, you spoke again, like you during the early part of your journey with your after your prognosis and everything. You said earlier that in between bouts of palliative radiotherapy, you scuba dive with a great white shark.
Yeah.
So that's not what most people do. I mean, obviously, there's a great stigma around, these sharks and the 𝗬𝗏𝗏 incident with stingrays and things like that. So these creatures in the ocean are out to get us. They're waiting to eat us or kill us or whatever. But the reality is, I know you're in a cage when you dived with a great white, but what was the experience like? Was it terrifying, or were they just magnificent creatures?
Yeah, just magnificent creatures. I've got this strange predisposition that the closer a shark gets to me, the calmer and more blissed out I feel. I'm more terrified of an ocean without sharks. I think they perform a vital role in their ecosystem. Someone said to me the other day, do you kind of sense something different in the energy in the water when there's predators in the water? I'm like, everything in the water is a predator. If the fish is this big, the size of a pinky fingernail, it's eating something else. That's just a chain of predation that keeps the ocean healthy and as it should be. So yeah, I mean, if I met a great white outside of a cage, I'd be a little bit excited by that. And I've met some great sharks, like 7-gill sharks that have come up out of nowhere and given my camera a kiss. And I've spent time with tiger sharks, and I really do think that there's a social conditioning that defaults society to a fear perspective rather than an awe perspective, and I think that's really quite dangerous. Stingrays as well. I've met so many beautiful stingrays almost every day. I'm interacting with them very closely. I think there've been 3 deaths in Australian history that are stingray related. One happened to be very high profile. And then there's this demonization of the species that is probably not healthy or accurate. So yeah, everything's dangerous on land and in the ocean, but we need to navigate it with wisdom and respect. And it makes me really sad when people start to say, there was an incident with a shark that, we now need to go cull the shark. When we enter the water, we're in their territory. We need to be respectful. We need to accept the risks, and we need to do everything we can to minimize and mitigate those and respect that the shark is not out to get us. We're not their natural prey.
Do you, when you're diving with sharks, do you get any awareness of sort of aggressive behavior?
Most sharks that I've met have been very calm and sometimes quite timid in their interactions, although a lot of the interactions I've had with sharks, not all of them, but a lot of them have been within a controlled sort of scenario where they might, and which is controversial in its own. When you go to Fiji and they're hand feeding tiger sharks and that sort of thing. But there's a conditioning that can happen there that perhaps provides a greater sense of reassurance to someone in the water that, it's not just a wild sort of encounter. But yeah, I think once we're in the water with them, we need to play on their terms. And where I have seen that kind of energy change is at night. If a shark's hunting, you'll know about it, and all the other fish, their energy is very heightened as well, because they're reassessing their life choices in the face of that shark hunting. And that's what they do. If we're hungry, we're going to go to the fridge and get something to eat. The shark's hungry, it's going to go hunt something to eat. It's not looking for people, and the energy changes because they're very efficient hunters.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, we're going to listen to your fourth song now, PT, which is Sullen Girl by Fiona Apple. What can you tell us about this one?
Yeah. Again, same sort of theme. I'm sorry to pick songs that are also sort of similar, but maybe
That's good.
someone out there needs this message to encourage them. But, you know, Fiona Apple was recording this album. She was very young. I think she was something like 13 when she wrote the songs and maybe 15 when she recorded it. And she sounds 35. The entire album is so mature, but she just had horrific life experiences. And, you know, the one thing about this song that I really resonate with, as I think I mentioned earlier, was she's got these lines about how difficult her current scenario is. And she goes into this chorus of, it's calm under the waves in the blue of my oblivion. And, you know, for me, that's what the ocean has been, is like when life has at times in the past been so overwhelming that I could barely function above the surface, to be able to be calm under the waves in the blue of my oblivion and just find whatever that restorative power is. And yeah, I just think it's a beautifully written, beautifully performed, beautifully recorded sentiment that really resonates with me. So I think there's always, no matter what we're going through, you know, even when we feel at rock bottom, there is always some way that we can find some sort of positive balance when we're open to that.
So when you're not diving, PT, what's a normal day like for you?
I don't understand the question.
A normal day?
What do you mean when I'm not diving? Can you rephrase that?
Okay, let's go back then. Let's say, all right, so I know you dive, any opportunity you can get a dive. You have to go and get your tank serviced and you have to get those bits and pieces serviced. Is that the only thing that stops you from going underwater?
When I'm not diving, I'm thinking about diving. When I get out of the water, I'm already, as I'm getting my wetsuit off, I'm planning, hoping I can get in again soon. You know, as a photographer, you have to upload your pictures into your editing suite and keyword them and then edit them. And I'm probably about 30 or 40 or 100 dives behind where I should be with that at the moment. So there's always that. That to me, although it's necessary work and that does take up chunks of time, is not my favorite part of diving. That can feel a bit like the chore part.
Yep.
But without that, you don't have the joy of sharing the images. So it doesn't take me much to convince myself to dive. But I take a bit more convincing to do my editing homework. But, you know, I also have to rest. One of the, you know, when you've been ill, you have to adjust to a new normal. And my life used to be very work, very career focused. And when that was kind of taken out of the equation, one of the things I have to do is manage my energy levels. So when I'm not diving, sometimes I'm completely crashed. And hopefully I'm just resting before I get to that point. So I rest. And I think that's something we've forgotten how to do in our society as well. You know, there's a big gap between the workaholic and the couch potato. But there's good aspects to be learned from both of them, in moderation, in the right balance. And I just love connecting with people. I spend a lot of time on the phone to my family, friends and loved ones. Yeah, just playing with my kitten, you know, doing all the warm, fuzzy things in life that I enjoy. We're going for walks, you know, connecting with nature in that way.
Yeah. How have you gone during the whole COVID lockdowns and things like that? Have you still managed to get out and dive, or has that been sort of a bit restricted?
When Melbourne had a 5-kilometre radius that we weren't allowed to leave, there were quite a few months there that I didn't dive. And then they opened up that if we had a buddy, they called it a bubble buddy, which was quite appropriate because I did have a buddy who lived near the pier I wanted to dive, so we could blow bubbles together. Okay. So we created our bubble, and so I got started back into the diving. Listen, I feel like a lot of people were impacted so much more adversely than I was. I've kind of learned with my life that, you know, I had a lot of things that I thought were important to me that I've had to let go for various reasons. And I've learned to be at peace with things that come and go in my life for different reasons, and you know, losing a little bit of freedom for a little bit of time. Honestly, my life is so good, so blessed, so positive. I would really struggle to complain about that. And I think every hardship we go through, every challenge, every restriction can teach us something else.
Yeah.
And I've learned to go with the flow as I've got older rather than fight you know, the bottom line is all of this stuff is like a riptide. If you fight the rip, you'll probably drown. But if you go with it, it might bring you back to where you need to be. And so that's kind of how I've navigated that. Do I miss travel and warm water and exotic critters and tropical islands? Yes. But how privileged was I to ever have experienced those things in my lifetime anyway, you know? So I'm not going to feel deprived and woe is me about that. And I think we'll all come through this together, and if there's a new normal, we'll figure it out and how to keep moving forward.
Yeah. And one thing I've got from this opportunity to chat to you is your incredible positive outlook on things and acceptance of what you can't change and making the most out of what opportunities you can. So do you find that you have to physically tell yourself to switch off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a television person. I'm not a radio person. Occasionally I'll be a YouTube person and, you know, fall down some rabbit hole that is interesting me at that exact moment. But I've learned one of the things that having been unwell has taught me is to listen to my body and to stop well before I reach anywhere near what my limit would be so that I don't crash. But yeah, I have a lot of days where I just say, well, the energy fairy didn't show up today.
Yep.
And that's my reality. And, you know, I used to beat myself up and say, well, if I'm spending 1, 2, 3 days flat on my back in bed instead of being productive and doing what I want to do, you know, that used to be a fail to my own assessment. Now that's just part of how I navigate life to make sure I have the energy to do the things I need to do. And that can be hard for people too, to see when I'm so active and so, you know, productive and so vibrant and energetic. They don't see the parts where I'm flat on my back and can't do very much at all. You know, they see the energetic parts. So, but there's definitely both of those elements in that big picture.
Okay. Is there anything you want to like take a picture of that you haven't yet? Like, I know you said you got the male seahorse incident the other day, but is there anything else that's like you just really want to try and get?
Yeah, top of my bucket list is a blanket octopus, which can be found in the waters of Anilao in the Philippines. In actual fact, the last prize trip that I won from the ocean art competition was to go back to my favorite resort in Anilao. So I'm going to get, hopefully, if borders and flights and things open up, another chance to go back and try and do one of these blackwater safaris where you sleep all day, dive all night, and you dive out over, you know, 2,000 meters deep of water or whatever it is with no land in sight.
Wow.
Down to 30 meters. And that's the hunting territory to try and find a blanket octopus, which is the most glorious creature, in my opinion, on the planet. And I am yet to see one.
Is that right? Wow. And do you get freaked out by like having that nothingness below you?
It's really quite trippy. It's like diving in glitter. It's very black with a billion particles all lighting up around you. And it's quite disorienting. There's no visual cues other than a dropped line of lights every 5 meters down to 30 meters. And you just drop straight down to the bottom of that line and work your way up for the dive. But yeah, the first few times it can be a little bit freaky, but it's actually really exhilarating and very unique. It's the new frontier for diving and people who like underwater photography and alien critters.
Okay, well, we're going to listen to your last song then, PT, Never Say Die by Cliff Richard.
Yeah, so I've got really fond memories as a child in the back of the car where I spent many, many hours with my brother. I've lived in over 45 houses, so there were often long car rides from one residence to the next one. But we would always have this song on, and my brother and I don't know if you ever had this song that you would sing with siblings, and it'd be your duet in the back of the car every single time you got in the car. And this was ours. And I think this song actually became foundational for us both in facing all of the challenges of our lives, of which there have been many and varied. And just this don't give up the fight, keep going with all of your might. It just became this real mantra of hope and strength and resilience and perseverance. And it's a feel-good song. And anyone who's going through a rough time would be well advised to pop this one on. Plus, I just love his voice. And when I was really sick the last time round, one of my dreams in life, speaking of bucket list, was to meet Cliff Richard when I grew up, from probably when I was the age of 4. And although that may never happen, a friend of mine reached out to him and told him how sick I was, and he sent me a handwritten postcard. And that also, and he said, something like, "Dear PT, stay strong, lots of love, Cliff." And that gave me as much strength and hope just from that postcard that he sent as this song had throughout my whole entire life leading up to that. So it's a good, fun, uplifting song that will make you feel good by the time you've finished listening to it.
Okay, PT, thanks so much for spending some time with me tonight. It's been absolutely wonderful finally getting to meet you and chat about what's going on in your life. I really wish you all the best with your future diving experiences, and I hope you get to see the blanket. Is it blanket octopus or blanket squid?
Blanket octopus, me too.
Well, I can't wait to see those images, and hopefully we'll be gazing at them with envy, maybe.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. Really great to be able to share some stories and experiences and songs with you and your listeners.